I took over as TREX Curator and Manager in 2008, in August of 2008. I'd say at least 60 exhibitions as TREX Manager, and then I curated exhibitions at the AGA for 8 years before that. In my TREX exhibitions, I've featured over 120 artists. My background is in education, in social studies and anthropology and English. Well, a lot of the work here was collected when I lived in Africa. In fact, when I left, my very first teaching position was in Eswatini at a Roman Catholic mission school. So this print up here was my going away present, and that was in 1988. So I've always had an interest in the news, in what's been going on in the world around me. So that's kept me in touch with shifting issues and changes in society. I am gay, and so part of a marginalized community, and very much aware of changes within that community, in political structures regarding that community. So my background, my interests, my own personal situation has kept me aware of what's going on, and these are things that I've tried to address in my exhibitions as well. I come from the Stone Age, where we used to carve on stones. So technology has definitely been a challenge for me, so I've had to learn an awful lot over 15 years. And when the pandemic hit, our exhibitions were shut down because venues closed up. And so the Alberta Foundation for the Arts, I think it was Gail Lind from the AFA, asked how we were going to keep the program vital in this changing climate. And that was about the time that a lot of people were jumping on Instagram. I didn't even have a cell phone at that time, but I thought, well, I see other people doing this, and I heard of one of the other TREX managers who did set up an Instagram account, and I thought, this is a good idea. So I actually had to bite the bullet and get a cell phone and set up an account, which was all new to me, but has become an integral part of the TREX program since 2019. One of the things, and this was set up before I became TREX Region 2 a curator. This was a sponsorship set up by a past director of the Art Gallery of Alberta with Syncrude Canada, was to feature Indigenous artists in Indigenous emphasized exhibitions. Now those proved extremely successful in my region and throughout the province, especially in the climate of truth and reconciliation, and there being a very large component of the social studies program in schools addressing Indigenous issues and history. So those exhibitions were very successful, very popular. So I think in that way, my programming had quite an impact on people throughout the province. And in my final year, I still managed to do a final Indigenous artist-focused exhibition because I saw that these were really important and popular. I've also tried exhibitions which address the LGBT community, new immigrants from all over, and they've been well received. I can only judge by how quickly they are booked and how well they are booked by venues to host, and they've been booked very well. So with my venue clients, there is an interest in these exhibitions. I think it's very important because curators from marginalized groups or underrepresented groups have knowledge and contacts that I, as a Ukrainian English Canadian, don't, and have insights into cultures, traditions, all sorts of knowledge that I don't, because I am an outsider to these communities. So I think that is important, but at the same time, a curator has to have the courage to go outside into areas that they're not comfortable with or that they don't know. For example, the last Indigenous-focused exhibition I did, which is just finishing up its first year of travel and then transfers to some of the other TREX regions, features work by two urban emerging Indigenous artists that probably wouldn't be considered by more traditional curators. But I thought it was important to feature the work of urban Indigenous people. Edmonton has one of the largest populations of Indigenous urban citizens in the country, and yet they're never really looked at. Most people tend to go with traditional Indigenous art, traditional crafts, whereas these young men were looking at very different issues. So I think one has to strike a balance, because things can be skewed only in one direction. It's the mandate of the Alberta Foundation for the Arts for the TREX program is to share Alberta's visual culture with primarily rural communities. So when I started as TREX Curator, the program offered exhibitions to far fewer communities and venues, and those communities and venues could take more exhibitions than what I began to offer within 2 years of being in the program. I followed that AFA mandate to build up my community and client lists. I also only allowed clients to book 2 exhibitions in a calendar year, whereas before me, venues could book up to 4, but I wanted more people to see the exhibitions and gain from that experience. I created interesting exhibitions, challenging exhibitions within the limitations of the program. The Indigenous focused exhibitions were extremely successful. They were booked within minutes of the TREX booking catalog going online or being mailed. Any one of them were grabbed up. Outside of them, it's very difficult to say. All I can really say is that over 15 years, my exhibitions in my region, I had 100% booking rate. So everything was taken. My most challenging exhibition was probably the exhibition called Re-Imaging Normal, which focused on the LGBTQ community. Was probably the most challenging exhibition because it involved dealing with artwork that many viewers are uncomfortable with. So having to choose artwork, write about artwork and artists that many communities aren't comfortable with in a way that allowed them to enter. The exhibition that has taught me the most is probably an exhibition that just started traveling in September, entitled Cradle. This is an exhibition which features the work of 3 Middle Eastern artists who currently reside in Edmonton. One is originally from Syria, he's a Syrian refugee. The other is an artist from Pakistan, right near the border with Afghanistan, and the third artist is originally from Palestine. My knowledge of these regions is limited and very much based on ancient history. I created this exhibition looking at artists who are from regions associated with traditional concepts of cradles of civilization, places where urbanization, domestication of animals, higher level political structures first began. So, like I said, the one artist, Aboud Salman from Syria, with the Mesopotamian culture. Riaz Mahmud from Pakistan, from a region associated with the Indus River civilization of India, Pakistan. And then Hani al-Khoury from Palestine, associated with Palestine, Israel, and way back with ancient Egypt. So that was the basis of the exhibition, but through developing the exhibition, talking with the artists and doing research, I learned about the colonial history of these countries and discovered facts and information that I had no knowledge about. So that was very challenging, was certainly fascinating, and is very apt for current situations. One of the things I instigated in my programming with TREX was interviews with artists. We have to develop an education guide for the exhibitions, and artists supply artist biographies, artist statements. I've never really been satisfied with those because they tend to be very much based on one's education and exhibition history, but they've never really told me much about the artist. So I instigated a process of doing artist interviews for each exhibition I developed of contemporary artists. And one of the questions I would always ask is why the artist makes what they make, and what their intent is. And I've found that for many artists, they never think about that. I have one artist who is still floored. She's in an exhibition that will start traveling in September of 2024. So one of my final tasks was to do an interview with her. And she still messages me and says, "Oh, that question, I've never thought about that." And she's, an older artist. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, you have to think about these things as an artist, because if you're putting your work out for people to look at, then I think it behooves you as an artist to provide insights into that work and be able to answer that question, why you make what you make and the way you make it. Why do you do those things? Because there is a reason. So I would tell artists to think about that. TREX is an extremely valuable program, not only because I worked for TREX, but in this contemporary climate, art venues are becoming less and less. The arts is in danger. And so TREX is really one of the very few vehicles for sharing art with the general public. TREX is also one of the very few vehicles that gives contemporary artists a voice and allows them to share their work. TREX is one of the few opportunities most artists will ever have, because there are fewer and fewer galleries and fewer opportunities within the galleries that exist. So TREX has a tremendous role within the province. Well, as I said to my successor, I said, of course, update the technological abilities of the program, because I was a fossil. But one of the things I said was to draw upon your interests. Think about what interests you, what you like, not only artistically, but in all aspects, and investigate those things. It's very easy as a curator to be caught in the fashions of the moment, but that's very limiting. In Alberta, we have 118 years of artistic practice in this province. Investigate that. Look at the people who have come before. Look at the old artists who are still practicing. They still have vital things to say, and they had a tremendous impact on what is being done today. So have a broad view of the arts. Oh, I hope that the arts receive, the visual arts especially, the recognition that they're due, that art is recognized as something valuable and integral to a healthy society. As I wrote in one exhibition didactic, art is all around us, and everything that we do is based on artistic premises. House designs, clothing designs, colors of the year in Pantones, car designs. Everything is based on artistic principles, which to me translates into having a healthy visual arts culture is integral to our society, because everything around us is based on those same artistic principles as are seen in a painting or in a sculpture. I've always been a collector. It's in my genes. I get it from my grandmother, whose walls were covered with photographs and things that she had picked up in her travels and whatever. And I was always fascinated by her home. And I think I inherited that. So I've always collected things. I spent a month in Guatemala many years ago, so I collected masks from there. I spent a month in Ghana, collected masks from there. And then I happened to meet and marry a man who also is a collector and obsessive about putting things up on the wall. For both of us, the idea of a blank wall is horrific. Empty space is just, it's unfathomable to think of it. And so wherever I worked, wherever I've traveled, both before I met my husband and afterwards, I've collected things. Art by people, crafts by people, things I pick up in a field, in the forest. And then my husband and I have been fortunate to travel, and so we always at least bring one artistic item back from the places that we have visited. So, as I said, I spent 6 years in Southern Africa. I brought a lot home. I spent 5 years up north. I collected Inuit art. And since being back in the city for basically 25 years now, we've collected art from people we know. This is a piece by Mr. Shillinglaw. She did a couple of TREX shows with me. She was curator for one, and then she was in a show as an artist. And she's in the AFA collection. This is a work by Spider Yardley Jones. People whose artwork interests us at art walks in the city. We love going to the antique mall. And then we have our own art practices as well. So the items on the wall are an eclectic collection of all of this stuff. There are also a number of religious items, artifacts on the wall. We are not religious. We just have an obsession with religious iconography. And so there's a lot of that on the walls, interspersed with African masks, Inuit sculptures and wall hangings, West Coast masks, and the more the merrier. We used to get larger pieces. They're getting smaller and smaller, because to put a new piece on the wall involves hours of work because there just isn't any space anymore. And then this is my studio in here. I have a very healthy art practice. I've been making art since I was 19. Every day I work on it. But I haven't had a great amount of time to market it, to put myself out there. So for me, artistically speaking, I want to keep creating art, but I'd also like to find opportunities to share it that I never really had the time to do before. An Alberta born and raised boy. So I mainly started doing landscapes or still lifes, but mainly landscapes. But then through meeting Chris, going to university, things that happened at the same time, basically, I began to change. And I first started doing these very relief kind of landscapes. And then I went to much more social, figurative kind of collage work that I'm doing now. Proudest moment as an artist. Each day is a proud moment when I can actually summon the energy to work on my art. I mean, I haven't received a lot of recognition as an artist, but I guess the greatest recognition I received was being shortlisted for the Edmonton Eldon and Ann Foote Prize back in 2015, I think it was. So there were, out of a long list, 3 artists were shortlisted, and I was one of those artists. So I guess that's my greatest recognition. I've had a couple of artist-run exhibitions over the years and been in a few other group shows. But like I say, I very much under the radar as an artist. I had an exhibition at Latitude 53. I had an exhibition at Harcourt House Artist Run Center. A few years ago, there was an exhibition space called the Brighton Block, and they had a couple of group exhibitions. I was in one of those. I also was with the Scott Gallery, a commercial gallery here in Edmonton, for a number of years. That's about it. I just do art in my basement.